Now the recording has started for Live with Liv, and we're going to have a little chat here. So that is, I am Rebecca Charlton, and this is
Sarah McKnight, and we are together Liv Bartlett.
That is true, and we're working on cool new covers, so that's secret.
They're so awesome. Oh my gosh, they're so amazing. Yes.
Yeah, we're very excited about this one. All right, but we thought we would meet up a little bit regularly and talk about things in the writing community or the storytelling community that we're thinking about, and talk about, I guess, just our thoughts on various things. So do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
How about you go first, since this was your brilliant idea?
This is my brilliant idea.
It was. It is brilliant.
So my musings right now are all about the horror genre, which is pretty unusual because I don't like horror. I really don't even necessarily enjoy being scared all that much, but I have a few things in Horrorland that I just love. And one of them are M. Night Shyamalan films. And yes, I know there is a large number of people who say, but I find he is a master at combining art, storytelling, and horror in ways that are just really psychologically thrilling to me. So we saw Glass, and I loved it, but I liked it more than Split, which I know is not necessarily how the fans are lining up. But to go back to the storytelling aspect, so this all starts with Unbreakable, which was in the early 2000s, so it's been a long time coming to finish this trilogy. And it's a film with Bruce Willis about Bruce Willis coming to this place of believing or accepting that he is a superhero. He has superhuman strength and abilities. And then along the way, he discovers also who his nemesis, his arch nemesis is. And the movie is known for being plotting and slow moving. It's quite sad. The family's in this really, really sad place, and the main character is just chronically depressed. So the movie moves along at this kind of just slow, almost arduous pace towards its conclusion. I found it really emotionally aware because you do feel this moment where he actually gets some idea of purpose for himself, and all of a sudden the colors and the pacing and everything just starts to pick up. And so I found it a really visually appealing way to bring awareness to this man's depression and what actually pulls him out of it, even at the same time that you have some doubts, because M. Night Shyamalan he doesn't like to answer all your questions as you go along. So you have some doubts about all the things that are happening, but you're kind of just brought along on this journey with this person. So then Split surprised everybody by being placed in the same universe. And Split is the story of a man with 23 personalities all living inside one body. And James McAvoy, regardless of whether you like the story at all, it is acting to end all acting. And I will never understand why acting awards do not respect people who play multiple personalities or multiple versions of the same character. And I know we've talked about this before, Sarah, that they just, I don't know why, because he plays 23 different people in this film, and you know who is speaking by his face and the way he holds his body before he ever announces the person's name or someone says it. So it's the most brilliant acting I've probably seen in a decade. He just does a good job.
I'm going to interrupt, and I think it's because it's a genre film. I think it's one of those things where genre films don't get awards, genre TV shows don't really get awards. I mean, because what you're talking about is close to what Tatiana Maslany did in Orphan Black, and while she got a couple nominations over the course of that show, there was no payoff for one of the tour de force pieces of acting on television in the past 20 years, you know? So I think it's a genre thing. People still kind of look down their nose on genre. You know, I don't even know if Game of Thrones gets acting nominations really. So I mean maybe the SAGs I think have nominated the ensemble. But so again, because it's fantasy, and Orphan Black was science fiction, and Split is horror, and so it's all genre. whatever.
Well, I mean, I'm a literary fiction snob, so I don't really have any reason to. I'm currently licking my wounds at being snubbed for literary fiction because they don't like literary fiction. So I think it is that problem of the subjective nature of various things. But one way or the other, it's this really incredible bit of acting. And so this man, what's happened is he's got about half the personalities have decided that they need to create a human sacrifice for this beast character that they think is emerging in them, and the other half doesn't want it to happen. So this man is having this internal conflict playing out in front of the 3 girls that he's imprisoned to be a human sacrifice. And that's pretty much the entire film, is just watching to see which group of these personalities is going to win in this giant, I mean, it's just him. And half the time it really is just the camera on him while he has multiple people having arguments inside his head about whether or not to sacrifice these girls. So Split is amazing and psychologically trippy. It does end in an extremely gory way. So if you don't like gore, which is usually what I don't like in horror movies, yeah, I spent most of the end of Split with my husband just narrating the whole thing to me. But Glass then brings both of these movies together, but these 3 people end up captured in the same universe. So the arch nemesis, you've got Bruce Willis's character David, who believes he's a superhero, and then you have this split personality DID situation. And this woman is there, and she is trying to convince them that they are just mentally unwell, and that they need to do something to bring themselves out of this delusion of grandeur because people are getting hurt by the things that they believe. And it's a really well-drawn, trippy experience because not that much happens. So we're kind of back to the pacing of Unbreakable, but you're going through everything like, wait, no, I really saw this. I really believe this has happened. But, now I just forgot her name. Sarah is her first name. But anyway, she does a beautiful job being this really caring psychologist.
Sarah Paulson. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, and she does a beautiful job of just being this person, and yet you're sitting there and you're so busy being gaslighted yourself by everything that's happening that you don't know who to believe. You're like, wait, do I believe these 3 that are telling me they're superhuman? Do I believe myself, who lives in a reality where that doesn't happen? Do I believe this woman who's telling me these people are mentally unwell? And you just kind of play along in this, I don't really know what's real, and nobody seems to know what's real, clear until the final conclusion of the film. So, yeah, it's horror in that there's some really scary moments, and the beast, who is the evil character inside the man with DID, he's terrifying. Every time he comes out, he's just horrifying. But at the same time, even when you're watching him do horrible things, there's this bit of doubt that's been sown in you to be like, wait, is he really just a psycho like Jeffrey Dahmer? Or is he actually capable of superhuman abilities? And it makes it, to me, like that element of horror is so much more interesting than some bad guy with a knife slashing through a bunch of teenagers. Is that idea. We then went to see A Quiet Place, my husband and I, because I've been playing with this idea. And I mean, A Quiet Place has a really straightforward premise, but it's that psychological piece of it, of what would I do? How would I respond? Would I be the person who just sacrifices myself because I want the fear over and I want to deal with it? Or would I be the person who holds on and tries to survive as long as possible, believing that there might be a solution I just haven't found yet? So those were kind of the stories that I wanted to talk about, is this idea of horror being a place that we explore human emotion. And I went to a panel this weekend where they talked about horror, and they said 2 things that I thought were really vital as I think about this as a genre. One of which was horror only works if you're dealing with 2 antithetical emotions at the same time. So horror that's just fear-based or gross-out-based is really just torture porn. It's not really horror. Horror that plays like in A Quiet Place, where you have that devotion of parents to their children and their life, so that deep abiding love that you feel, played against the terrifying situation of everyone being about to die, that works as something that's horrifying. I think in Glass, what ended up working really well there was it played against our own self-doubts that we have about ourselves, our own unwillingness to believe that we might be anything special at all, played against this idea that what if there are superhumans, that creates an incredible amount of fragility, that now people could be capable of horrible things or wonderful things, but they would look just like us. And so they stop being monsters, even though they might be monsters. And so I think it played with that level of doubt as both a good thing and a bad thing really beautifully and made that work. And but Split, this was the funny part. My husband was like, I was totally grossed out by The Beast. The Beast didn't scare me all that much. I was more terrified by the fact that you could have 23 people having an argument in your head and not be sure what you were going to do. So I liked that they talked about that. I thought there were some interesting elements of that. But the other thing that they talked about is that horror as a genre explores the undeniable human truths that we see even in extraordinary circumstances. So it takes something it wants to talk about and then amplifies it to a point that we all have to recognize ourselves within the characters. And that's what makes it work, is when we can actually look at ourselves. So those were my thoughts on horror this week.
No, that all sounds incredible, and I'm basically convinced now to watch Split, so that I can watch Glass. It's so intriguing to me, the idea of the sneaky trilogy.
Yeah.
Like, that he strung this out over the course of, 14 years?
14 years.
More than that. I want to say Unbreakable was like 2002.
It was way early 2000s.
Yeah. So just the idea that a filmmaker would do this, like have a movie and then 15 years later release a sequel, and then not until Glass came out, I think, were people talking about, these are all connected. Mm-hmm. Do any of the characters from Unbreakable show up in Split?
Yeah, you have Bruce Willis's character and his son, who are the two primary characters from Unbreakable. And they both give great performances, really believable performances as a father and son 19 years later, after going through what they went through to discover who Bruce Willis is.
Okay. All right.
And in fact, the son was one of my most... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just didn't know that it was obvious in Split that it was part of the same universe.
It was not. Not until it's the teaser in the trailer, or the teaser, the Easter egg in the credits, and all of a sudden Bruce Willis's character pops up. So sorry to spoil it, guys, but you should know by now.
So because that was the thrust of the marketing for Glass, is these are all now a thing. Like, this is all in the same universe. This is all together, which was just incredibly intriguing to me, from like here's a storyteller who decided to do this. And did he mean to do this when he created Unbreakable? Or did he go back to that story 14 years later and think 13 years later, whenever it was he started writing Split, and say, here's another wrinkle, another layer of this world. Here's another character I want to explore. I just want to know. There's probably interviews about it. I don't know, but that's intriguing.
I try really hard. I think you enjoy an M. Night Shyamalan movie more if you go in with no expectations. I just find him really edgy. I think people will appreciate him a lot more in 10 years than they appreciate him right now, because he even reinvents himself every time he makes a movie. So I'm never entirely sure what I'm going to see. And if I go in without saying, I'm going to go see Sixth Sense again, if someone looks at it like that, then they're disappointed every single movie. But if I go in and say, I have no idea what I'm about to experience, I usually love what he gives me. There's been a few misses, I will say. I didn't like it.
The Happening was horrible.
It was horrible.
Be real.
Yeah, it was sad. Sorry, I'm usually a fan, but that was gross. Way gross. Couldn't do it.
Which one?
The Happening. Yeah.
I don't remember what was gross about it. I just remember it was boring, and Mark Wahlberg was completely unbelievable. Like, not unbelievable like amazing, but unbelievable as in, why did you cast this dude?
Yeah.
Just unfortunate. I like Mark Wahlberg.
I know, and it's weird that he and Bruce Willis get each other. I mean, the M. Night Shyamalan and Bruce Willis get each other, but they really seem to. Like, he gets amazing performances out of Bruce Willis. They just don't see everywhere else from him. Like, they're really nuanced, and he seems to like the subtlety in the way that he acts as this character. And even in Sixth Sense, we got a lot of nuance that you don't see as, he's bursting through. Sorry, I just saw Lego Movie 2 where they make fun of Bruce Willis, and it's all about him just climbing through air ducts, and it's very funny. Weekend of Bruce. We love you, Bruce.
Sorry, Bruce, but we do love you. We really do. Like,
but
he's fantastic in Red. Like, he's got comic chops too. That's the thing I think we forget about Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
And what we see often in actors is that if they've got comedy timing, they're capable of a lot of other, like, layers and depths and emotional kind of things. Yeah.
No, and the father-son dynamic is just really lovely. And again, played extremely subtly by this. And this is a character who is known for being, like, really quiet and inside himself. And so this dynamic between him and his son just is all in sublayer. But that's something I really love in decent literature or film, is when I have to read subtext in order to understand the overt text. And I think that's something M. Night Shyamalan does almost better than many other filmmakers in the business.
That's great. So, like I said, I'm convinced. I gave you the task of convincing me to watch Split and Glass, and you've convinced me.
At least go see Split, because you should see James McAvoy. It's just.
I know I have it, like, somewhere around here, so I could just watch it, which maybe I'll do that after I finish season 2 of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, you've got a lot of podcasting going on, dear.
Well,
and Facebook Living.
Well, no, here's the thing about the Game of Thrones recaps is that I got tired of my own face on Facebook Live videos, which is why I was like, no, I'm just going to give this podcasting thing a go, because I'm obsessed with having a podcast. I have been for some time, and I listen to a lot of podcasts that are people talking about film and TVs, and it's mostly guys, which frustrates me.
Yes.
Because I love Christopher Nolan movies too. I don't know why this run of, like, these particular guys talking about all the Christopher Nolan movies was only them, and that they didn't have any female co-hosts. But they brought on somebody's sister to talk about The Devil Wears Prada.
Oh, lovely.
Really, guys. I mean, I love The Devil Wears Prada also, but, anyway.
Yeah.
That's a tangent.
Well, I can go off on that tangent for a long time. It's really time we start blurring some gender lines, but that's another.
But so, what was interesting about yesterday was that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this podcasting thing, and I figured out a couple of the technical things that I hadn't really figured out before. And so watched an episode, took my notes, and recorded a podcast, and then went into the audio in this nice free program called Audacity, and edited out every time that edited out every time I said which was a lot. A lot.
I think it's so hard when you're talking to yourself not to do that, because you have no feedback, and your brain naturally pauses for feedback, and then your mouth is just like, and it's like, no, there's not going to be any feedback. It's just me here, folks.
And now I know what the audio profile of is.
That's funny. You're like, and that one. And I'm
just cutting these out, and it's possible that I over-edited the audio for the 2 that I did yesterday, but also podcasting, you have to be really dedicated to that. It takes time. There we go. Again, to experience the things that you're going to talk about, have some kind of coherent thoughts about it, record those, and then edit the audio. This is why real podcasters have producers.
Yes.
This is why real podcasters have producers. And it's not easy to function as your own producer. Even though I'm not doing anything important. I'm just watching Game of Thrones episodes and throwing out some thoughts about what I just watched.
No need to downplay. It's exciting. It's part of you. It is important. just perhaps is not going to become your day job.
No, it really isn't. And whether, I don't know that anyone's ever going to listen to them except me. You're not going to listen to them because you don't watch Game of Thrones, which is fine.
I have occasionally said I would get VidAngel, but then I worry about the time commitment as well. So my niece keeps offering me her VidAngel account to watch it. And that would seriously cut down. I went and loaded one on her account once, and it almost collapsed it by half once I took all the stuff out.
Wow. So I want to say that one of the episodes I just watched, there was not any nudity in it at all.
Wow.
I'm not going to rewatch it to confirm that, but I'm pretty dang sure that there was no nudity in at least one episode.
Wow.
At least one.
I'm so excited.
It really is. It really was. It's exciting.
So it might be my summer project. I don't mind finding something with that many episodes that I actually have to pay attention to, but I can't do it during the school year. There's too much vying for brain space.
Oh, completely. You don't want to be watching it for the first time right now.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of school.
No,
but so,
segue
to Game of Thrones, segue from Game of Thrones to the thing that I brought that I wanted to talk about is a piece of Game of Thrones fan fiction that, oh gosh, I don't know. Let me see if I can see when this was first published. 2011. And I first read it on LiveJournal. It was written by somebody who's writing fan fiction on LiveJournal that I thought was really cool, very elegant, striking fan fiction, and that played like the time and the idea of what does stuff look like on a page, just the way that you don't necessarily in fan fiction all the time. And now I'm getting feedback.
So I will pause this. Did that fix it when I muted myself?
Let's see. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay. So this is a piece of Game of Thrones fan fiction. If you are interested, I'm just going to read part of it. It's written by Arbitrarily is the name of the user on Archive of Our Own. She had a different name on LiveJournal. And it's called The Joinery. And it's an AU, an alternate universe, kind of Game of Thrones idea. And I'll read the little summary. Ned Stark takes the Iron Throne, and with it, a Lannister for a wife. So it goes back to about 15, 16 years before the events of the show and the books, and posits that instead of Robert taking the throne, that Ned does. And I still love this, and I love like the layers in this writing, and again, the elegance. I was not ever actually friends with this person, but I would, if she did a thing on LiveJournal that was a comment fan fiction kind of thread, I was paying attention because other people who wrote similarly were drawn into that circle, and I always wanted to be one of the cool people. I never was, but okay. So I'm just gonna read part of this and try not to sound like a total idiot. This feels awkward now.
You can do it. That's why we're doing this, to practice.
It feels awkward now. Okay. Title is The Joinery. Prelude, a war. 1. After war come the spoils, land and a title, gold, a woman, both. The spoils come solely to the victors, while the vanquished are left to recover what little honor is left them, to bury their slain, to try and escape first the brand and then the noose, attached to a single word, traitor. This misleads. The task of burying the dead is not left to the losing side alone, but rather both. Victory does not equal invincibility, nor does it promise happiness. War is not won without a steep cost, and it is oftentimes found that peace comes with a similarly expensive price. In this story, everyone gets what they thought they wanted. Land, a title, gold, a woman, both. They all come with a price. 2. King Eddard, the first of his name, of the House Stark, king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and protector of the realm. This story opens with a different start, though you shall find it ends the same song, a different singer. The start of a story is easy to change. It is easy to alter it, warp it, bend it the first to your will. It is the end you cannot change. The ends we meet are decided by the gods. Our ends are their ends, and while the path may vary, the end shall not change. It is this end that cannot be changed. King Eddard Stark altered the future of Westeros as only a king like him could do, and not a king such as Robert Baratheon would make. Yet know this, the ending before the beginning. Ned is beheaded at the Great Sept of Baelor. There will be a war after, a great war, or as great a war as any war can be, and there shall come to be many a king to simultaneously occupy the same realm where once stood only one. But Ned shall be king first. He will be a good king, the good king, in fact. But he will lose his head as Cersei Lannister stands off to his right. He will lose his head, and his wife will stand to the right and watch. The end cannot be changed. But first, the beginning. And that's all I'm going to read, just the prelude. But that's the kind of writing, when I was writing fan fiction, which is what led me to the idea that maybe I could write other things too. That's the kind of writing that inspired me and made me want to try for something more, to be more elegant, to have more to say, to, I don't know, to engage with the things that I already loved in deeper ways, in kind of more crazy, sideways ways. So there's that. I'm super embarrassed right now, guys.
And you should be. It was a fantastic reading. You did a good job. So, yeah, we should post the link to that. Is it still up, or did you download it?
So you can find it on Archive of Our Own, AO3, or I think it's still maybe probably available on LiveJournal. But if you just search for The Joinery, that's the title of the story, it's there on Archive of Our Own. And
do you have a password to get an Archive of Our Own?
No.
Oh.
Like, not to just go on there and read stuff.
Okay. Well, we will try to get everybody a link then, so that they can go.
It is more adult in its content, I will say that. So, like, it's pretty in line with Game of Thrones. But it's definitely writing that sparked something in me in terms of, I could play with writing and voice and sparseness and elegance, and just, I could play with things in different ways. I wanted to be this writer. I will admit it freely.
I think in some ways she is lovely, but in some ways you're at least equal. We'll go that way.
Okay. But that was 8 years ago. I mean, I started writing fan fiction on LiveJournal late 2009, after the new Star Trek. And that was in layering the experience of writing fan fiction on top of having been deep in storytelling with you for so many years is what finally made me think, oh, I could actually do this. Like, actually write. Instead of just dream about writing or admire other people's writing, other people's storytelling. That I have a lot of fun playing with other people's characters, but also we had these characters of ours. We had original characters to work with and an original world to tell stories in. And so, just the process of writing, whatever it is, brought me to, let's write a book.
Yes.
Let's write a lot of books. Yes, because there are going to be a lot of books.
Yeah. Well, and one of the interesting debates yesterday that happened, and we probably need to wrap this up, but it's something we might want to talk about later. They were talking about that the way people want stories told to them is evolving once again. and they like that interactive content of gaming is becoming so much more integrated into society. And I had really backwards thoughts about it because I was like, well, Sarah and I 20 years ago, that was really how these stories came to pass. It was very much kind of a create your own adventure story where I would set up some kind of thing and then we would hit a point that you would interact back, and that was what would develop the next point of story. And so they were really encouraging everyone to look at ways to do this. But then I also started thinking about how much is sacrificed in that level of storytelling. Because yes, it's really immediate and it's fun, but the kind of word crafting and emotional crafting that we can do when we sit down and craft a novel, and we go through all those steps of editing and we really think about story structure, that's a really, it's not necessarily something I want to sacrifice. And so I was doing a lot of kind of back and forth in my head for like, how is it possible to meet both demands? Or is this what's happened as we've lost storytelling as an oral technique? Because it used to be you would hear just average everyday stories by sitting around a campfire and people telling stories, and then you would read a novel or a book for an educational, think about it kind of experience. But we've lost half of that. So people are trying to bring that back, that more oral storytelling, because it is fun. It was a lot of fun to just tell each other the story and let it get as big or as little as we wanted and let it be ludicrous. You know, I remember one day I was just in the mood to like throw you for a loop. And that was when I introduced Philip. Like I was just in the mood to see what you would do with something. And I randomly threw a new boyfriend in there just to see what you would do with a super nice guy. Philip has ended up continuing to be one of my favorite characters that I've ever created. And so really enjoying how that grows, but how we represent Philip on the page now versus who he was has gone through its own kind of process. So I see such value in both sides of storytelling, both the storytelling that you create by sitting down and really refining a story, but also that kind of oral tradition of where can this story go and how do I play with my audience. And, you know, I think TV took that over for us a lot, but even TV has become so managed that we don't have that interactive layer of story anymore.
No, so it sounds like they were talking about really character-driven, choice-driven video games, which the ones that are done well, that people really love, they play through over and over again through multiple iterations of character and choices, and it's legitimate storytelling, and it is choice-driven. You know, the reader, the character, the player. Choice-driven, you know, and there was I haven't watched it, the Choose Your Own Adventure, Netflix one, Bandersnatch, what, I don't know. So I don't know that I'm super interested in having a Choose Your Own Adventure kind of a TV, or even Choose Your Own Adventure novels were never even interesting to me. You know, back in the day when they were big. But I was reading something recently that was talking about the difference between good and good to binge. So, so we have this divide now in TV where there's good and there's good to binge, and something can be both. But there can be stuff that's good to binge that is not necessarily good TV. And in that traditional sense of TV, in that, would you be happy watching one episode a week and having to wait the 7 days to watch another episode? Would you still be as engaged with this story and these characters and be able to pick up with what's happening if you had that time gap? That's like an interesting conversation. And in rewatching Game of Thrones, it's probably one of the last, beyond the networks, you know, the main networks, in terms of like cable stuff, like Game of Thrones feels like one of the last bastions of that week-to-week storytelling. that, like, these episodes very much, like, they stand alone in that there's a full thematic kind of a thing to them. And yes, you can binge watch Game of Thrones and it's satisfying that way, but it's just as satisfying to watch it on a week-to-week basis because there's a lot of tension and suspense and all of that, those kinds of things. So, I don't know. I just think we're just getting to a place where there's more... Everyone's talking about how things are becoming more merged. I think we're going to a place where there's just going to be more clear divisions. There's going to be a more clear division between what the network TV does, what the streaming services do, what cable TV does, and I don't feel like that's going to affect literature all that much.
Well, I think it's interesting. Another thing they said yesterday was commercial or genre fiction is something you can or you should be able to consume with little or no background information, whereas literary fiction or high art usually requires some education to understand. Not necessarily about that particular thing, but they brought up the example of To Kill a Mockingbird, and I should have written it down, but they talked about all 4 different novels that are referenced within that you would have to have some basic working knowledge to even understand what was happening, including the current events, because literature doesn't always give you all that background information. It usually lets you make assumptions, and it brings you in and drops you into something. And I think I can see both what you're talking about when I think about that, and I kind of think about what's going on with Hermana, my book right now. But I can definitely see when you and I write, we do expect a bit of education out of our readers. You know, we make references to Shakespeare that are not necessarily the easy ones. In fact, I don't even know that we've, other than to mock it maybe, we don't use the most common. We've used references from Tempest. You know, we bring in things like Richard Burton's performance and drop that there. And if you don't know what Richard Burton's performance is, we're kind of unapologetic, like get on YouTube and go see it.
And if you don't know who Burton and Taylor were and what their mythology was at that time in Hollywood, there's a whole other thing that you just don't get.
Yeah.
Which you don't necessarily need to get, but it's another layer that was put in deliberately.
Yeah. That we put in there, and we have deliberately thought about them and layered them. But I did see, as I was listening to them talk about it, some of the things that have frustrated me in the writing community, I think, are coming from that divide and not knowing how to talk about it. I don't think there is necessarily like, oh, only smart people like this or only uneducated. But I do think we need to be more honest about what we're writing and not act like each group actually owns what writing is. We're just writing something different. You know, so if I want to write something really smart and literary, I need to build that novel and think about it. On the other hand, you and I have played with some very formulaic toss-offs, usually between ourselves, because once we actually start putting a book together, we want it to be perfect and brilliant and beautiful. But we've done it. I mean, so I think it's just that admitting that some things serve different purposes and not pretending like because you like writing genre fiction or commercial fiction, that means you know everything that literary fiction should be. Uh-oh. I think I lost you.
No, and I really enjoyed the more literary... What was that?
No. I lost me. It's fine. Everything's fine. Finish your thought.
Okay. I think, like, there's genre fiction, there's science fiction and fantasy that is very smart and literary. Neil Gaiman is a great example of that. And I don't know, 4 books over here in my to-be-read pile that very much even on their surface, these are not one-offs in terms of like, this is just going to be an easy, fun read. Yes, it will be fun and it will be entertaining and it will satisfy a lot of, you know, just like, I just want to sit down and read something enjoyable, but it has those layers of literature and poetry and history and mythology and all these kinds of things. And it is ostensibly a science fiction novel. So things can be both.
Well, I know it's definitely what the conversation was about, was be as artistic and literary as your audience will tolerate.
Yeah.
But then the one guy that was there that I really enjoyed, he was like, yeah, but there's those of us who do this for art's sake. We write literature, and he said, and that is what matters to me, and that's what's in my soul. He's like, so I accept that I don't sell a whole lot of copies. He's like, but it kind of makes me sad that that people don't value both sides of this equation, that we have to constantly be making it as entertaining as the masses demand in the current publishing tradition. But that's probably another conversation for another time. It just reminded me of that there's always this. Writing Excuses also discussed it this week about, wanting to dive into a deeper artistic level and then hitting that point where people are like, no, we won't follow this anymore.
Well, and I will say that our genre is definitely more traditionally like deep literature, just in what you've done with the emotionality and the themes and everything of it. Though it reads fast, is an easy read, it just is not necessarily an easy emotional read if you're actually engaging with the emotion of it. I think which would be hard to read it and not engage with the emotion of it. Production values and off script they both live in that kind of both things. Like you could read both of those as production values more so, I think, as a fast, fun, like poppy kind of a read. But there are these layers, and there's the idea that it's not, there's some formula, but mostly we've tried to take the idea of formula and then excise some of that for the benefit of consequences actually being consequences, which is a very literary thing to do. So, I don't know. Maybe that's a problem.
Well, I think you did a lovely job of walking it. It was just kind of one of those interesting conversations for me about that fine line. And I'm definitely going through an artist renaissance, which we will have to, it was very funny. I was definitely having my like Hemingway moment where I was just like, F all the effers yesterday. And I was like, I'm not going to anything about marketing because I am over it. And I just want to write for me. And so, yeah, I'm definitely going through this like artistic renaissance of really wanting to make sure that my art has value for me.
Well, which it should. Like, there's no point, I think, in pursuing an art, any kind of, like, artistic anything. Like, what's the point in painting something if you don't enjoy the process of the painting or the final product? You know, same thing for writing a novel or a short story or anything. Like, you should enjoy it. You as the artist, the writer. And I think what's interesting about this conversation that they had it at that writing conference is that it's something that's also happening in the conversation around things like the Oscars. Yeah. It's always a conversation around the Oscars, but it seems like it's coming to a bigger, I don't know, because of Black Panther. There's a bigger conversation because Black Panther was hugely successful, but also incredibly well critically received, and a very complete movie into itself, even as it slots into the greater MCU. So there's a case being made by people with opinions, not necessarily Oscar voters, that Black Panther deserves Best Picture. But will the Oscars ever take a genre film and not just give it technical awards? Yeah. Well, now they're not even going to announce technical awards, so... Oh, they've reversed their stance on that. Oh, are they actually? I thought they were just going to do it at the very end. So, there was enough backlash from members of the Academy that they, I don't know if they're going to be at the very end, but no, because initially it was like they're going to do them during commercials and then you'll be able to see just the acceptance speeches like later. But they reversed that because there was enough backlash, and so they're back in as part of the regular telecast. Okay.
All right. Sorry. Apparently they want my son's play date home at some point. All right. Well, we should wrap this up, and we will talk again next week about musings and things, stories that have gripped us, things that inspire us, and lengthy conversations, because apparently we enjoy having some conversations.
We do. And I might still be talking about Game of Thrones.
She'll definitely be talking about Game of Thrones. So bye, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Bye.